One of the bigger stories in the markets over the past few years has been the performance of semiconductor stocks. That's been here in the US as well as globally. If we go back to the beginning of this, really was the end of 2022 when ChatGPT was first released. And we've seen a little bit of a cult following grow into just massive adoption. And those tools have become kind of ubiquitous with many others coming along the way. So one of the industries that it seems to have disrupted is software and services. So we'll talk about this from a couple of different angles. But if we go back and look at performance first, start in January of 2023, which is again when this really became mainstream, we see on the page here, performance that's pointed north is where the semiconductors are outperforming, and if you see a bar headed down, that's when software is outperforming. And you really just see across this entire period a whole lot more bars pointing up. So software has certainly struggled relative to semiconductors. And if you look all the way to the right, this was, last month in January, nearly 18% outperformance for semis over software. That continued into February with a 5% or so outperformance just during last week. And that was caused by a tool released by Anthropic that caused some concerns within one particular subsector even of the software market. A couple of things that we should talk about with this. First and foremost, AI is a very disruptive technology. And we've seen this historically when things change. I don't know that anyone at this point really knows how good or how limited these tools will be, but it's certainly causing concerns. If you go back to other examples in history, you see digital film versus the actual film itself basically disrupted an entire industry and changed it forever. That could be what we're looking at here. We just don't know yet. So along the way, there's a few things that we need to remember. First, know what you own. So subsectors, industry groups, make sure you're aware of where you're over and underweight because some of these moves are big and they can impact you. Same thing with individual names. Beyond that, at some point, we're going to need to see follow through here. So are these AI tools actually being used? Are they actually creating value? Or are we just adding cost to make our life a little bit easier, but it doesn't really save us that much money or that much time? I think we're all still learning how to use them. I know I am. And so I'm grateful for the tools I have. I'm sure that I'm not getting the most out of them. So that's the next evolution for all of this. And that's what's going to justify the valuations in the semi and semi-adjacent stocks that are extremely high. The other thing is realize when we have these disruptive events, the market has no patience. So we saw that last week, huge write-downs. Some of these software companies are falling 10, 15, 20% in a day, household names that we all know and still use. And the question really is, are we going to need as many subscriptions for software services if these AI tools play out? And the answer is no one knows. But when we're at high valuations, the patience for any sort of cloud in our future outlook is just zero. And so huge write-downs, massive volatility. Again, know what you own to help minimize that exposure. But the last thing here is for the software companies, they're going to have to prove that the tools that they have, that those subscriptions and that software as a service is actually partnering with or additive to these tech tools and these AI tools and isn't duplicative. Because if it's duplicative, the revenue is going to come down and maybe even entire industry, sub-industry groups may just go away. They may get replaced. So that will be the evolution that we'll have to watch. So again, control where your exposures are, make sure you know where they are, and then we'll certainly share more thoughts as we see how this evolves and how we all use them going forward.